As the situation worsens on the ground in Afghanistan, Canada's response continues to overshadow the messaging on the campaign trail here at home, forcing the Liberal leader to answer questions as Prime Minister.
We have been working day and night over the past months, past weeks and months to get as many people out as possible.
While the leaders vying for his job are being asked to explain what they would have done differently.
We would have gotten people out before the chaos erupted. But like most issues, Mr. Trudeau is late, no leadership.
So what kind of political impact does this have on the leaders campaigning? It's Thursday, and I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althia Raj, and Elamine Abdelmahmoud. Good to see you all. Obviously, this situation was unpredictable and basically came to a head today with the flights now shutting down and then the violence that has broken out. What does this mean, if anything, for the Liberals here, Chantal, do you think? And how does this play out through the campaign, or does it?
I can't speak about the rest of the campaign, almost a month, but it does hurt the Liberals on two scores. I think it makes the issue of why are we having an election campaign when all this is going on more of an issue than the Liberals should want. But it also, and I go back to the day when the election was called and the danger that there would be a disconnect between the images we would see out of Afghanistan and the Prime Minister going on his merry way campaigning and promising things that have little to do with Afghanistan. That's happening now, that gap between the campaigner and the reality of office that doesn't look like it's being filled.
Althia, what do you make? And the fact that we also had to leave so many people behind because of how quickly this all unfolded and how the situation was managed by the government.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Chantal's point, and we've talked about this, it's basically prevented the Liberal campaign from taking off because reporters keep asking questions about Afghanistan and rightfully asking questions about Afghanistan and not about the Liberals' announcement of the day. I think the risk is if we start seeing images that really directly connect the government's actions to the crisis. So if Afghan interpreters start getting murdered, if people with Canadian papers are found dead on the streets, I mean, that is really going to bring that home. And that could be the Alan Kurdi moment of the 2021 election campaign, and worse, actually. But I think on this issue, frankly, none of the opposition parties have a good answer either. I mean, for all of their complaints that, I would have led and I would have done things differently, when you actually look at the facts, nobody was really talking about this issue. The government did not do anything, and the Liberals could have brought in more Afghan interpreters earlier. But if you look at the record in the House of Commons, the last time anybody asked about this was in 2011, and it was Liberal MP Dominic LeBlanc wondering why the Conservatives were rejecting 2/3 of the Afghan appeals. And at that time, Jason Kenney, who was responsible for the government, responded that no, Canada had never made any promises to these people. So frankly, none of the opposition parties have a good record on this issue.
Okay, Andrew, how about you? How do you think it's being managed?
Well, that's as may be, but the government of the day is the government of the day, and it is the one that has responsibility for dealing with the situation that it finds. The collapse happened some days or weeks sooner than people anticipated, but everyone knew it was coming, has known it for months, has known it for years. So this is not just a matter of optics or politics. I'm sorry, it is. I have talked to people who have been involved in this file very closely.
Yeah.
And they are quite clear in saying that this was absolutely foreseeable. It was foreseen. People knew. So it's not just a matter of optics or politics. It's a matter that we've left behind thousands of people, including Canadian citizens, it appears, who are facing a very uncertain fate now. And whether or not the opposition parties would have done better or not, that can be debated. But what is certainly worth pointing out is holding the government of the day to account on that.
Maybe not years.
Yeah. Hang on one second. Okay. I'll just let Andrew and I just are going to quickly disclose two things around this situation. Andrew, I'll go to you first.
Yeah. So, I mean, my partner and I were involved in an effort to get some people out. We were successful, as it turned out, but we were among the fortunate few. And the other people that I have talked to who have been trying have met a uniform wall of difficulty and indifference and opaque communications and everything beyond that.
And I'll also just add that multiple news organizations, including this one, the CBC, also were working to get people out, people that were supporting our journalists during the conflict. And again, varying degrees of success there, just as Andrew said. Elamine, sorry.
The point that Andrew is making, I don't think it's true that people have been knowing that this is going to come for years, but certainly it's been months. Certainly like since maybe April or May, and certainly since Biden announced that the U.S. is going to pull out. You would expect that Canada would have mobilized to move a little bit faster on this, and they did not. And like that is something that is going to hang around Trudeau's neck this entire time. He keeps getting the question, how are you managing Afghanistan? And he keeps having to answer by saying, I'm campaigning just fine while managing that. Well, now it looks worse, and it's going to continue to look worse. But it's something that is in his favor, is that it is very early on in this campaign. And like we could be somewhere else 2-3 weeks from now. We could be talking about the Delta variant and not even remembering talking about Afghanistan. But as of right now, it's just a story that keeps coming back every day, right?
Okay, I want to move on if I can, and I know I'm cramming a lot in this week. But the other issue that came up this week is about, sorry, Althea, you wanted 10 seconds? Go ahead.
I just want to say that when you look at the American intelligence officials, reporting the New York Times, other American outlets, all say basically that the American intelligence did not actually think that the country was going to fall this quickly. They thought there was at least 18 months, maybe 2 years, and that it wasn't really until a month ago that they realized that things were drastically shifting. And so I don't think it's fair to say that the Canadian government knew this was going to happen when especially the Afghan PM was saying, like, please don't have evacuations because I don't want to look like I don't have any credibility in our forces either.
Okay, I do want to do a round on healthcare if I can, but just because it was a dominant theme already this week. And then today, the Quebec Premier François Legault shared his list of priorities for the federal parties. And one of them was, yes, obviously a healthcare transfer boost, but also please stay out of my business is basically what he said. I'll support parties that say that they're going to do that. Chantal, how do you read what the Premier said and how much healthcare is or will become an issue through this?
Whether it's an issue with voters remains to be seen. For sure, premiers are going to say, because that's been their position for a year and a half, that they want an increase in the transfer and not necessarily conditions and strings attached. I think the Liberals look weak on this as they are in attack mode because they seem to be, over the years, and I've covered federal campaigns for too long now, probably, so I've seen this movie again and again. The Liberals are never more interested in the integrity, quote unquote, of the Medicare system than when they're campaigning for re-election. Okay. And the rest of the time, you rarely hear about it.
Andrew?
Yeah, the Liberals are shocked to discover that there are private clinics operating. They're particularly exercised about them in Saskatchewan, less so in Quebec. So it is a bit corny. I think, as Chantal said, we've seen this movie before. We've also seen the premiers crying poor about healthcare for many, many years. But that should not obscure that, in fact, as I often say, the story of the boy who cries wolf ends with the wolf devouring the boy. We actually do have a healthcare funding crisis coming upon us because of the aging of the population. Yeah. But the discussion that has to begin is not just this annual thing of giving the provinces money, no strings attached, which therefore means no accountability either for it, but giving them the taxing powers to raise the funds themselves and be accountable to their own citizens for the results. So we've got to get out of this two-way blame game where in the end, neither level of government gets properly held to account for the results.
Last word to Elamine. Althea, I'll start with you on the next round.
I just really appreciated that you called it a list of priorities and not a grocery list, because there's something about Legault's approach to just saying, you know what, there are many things that I'm asking for. And yes, it is about healthcare, but also this is about autonomy. And I think the idea of Legault feeling emboldened by his popularity to basically dictate his terms, that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch. I was waiting for this to pop up. I thought it would pop up a little bit later on in the campaign, but here it is.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. We should point out that Andrew's dog really wanted to talk about healthcare too. You probably didn't know Andrew made an appearance just in the back. It was lovely and nice, refreshing to see.
In a new Democrat government, as Prime Minister, whether it's a majority or a minority, we'll look at that when it happens and make decisions that are in the best interest of Canadians.
The NDP leader there leaving the door open to working with all parties, including the Conservatives, after he was asked this week whether his party would prop up a minority Conservative government, something that hasn't happened yet, but there it is. It's on the table. And we're pointing this out because Jagmeet Singh, he said he would not do that back in 2019. So what's behind the change? Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine back for another round. Althea, I said I'd start with you. So tell me what you made of that answer and what we should make of it.
I think the New Democrats around Jagmeet think that Erin O'Toole is more palatable than Andrew Scheer. But more importantly, though, I would say that they want to keep their powder dry. If they find themselves in a situation where either the Conservatives or the Liberals can form government, ruling out voting or siding with the Conservatives basically means that they have no demands that they can place on the Liberals. And so it is strategically wiser for them to hold out that card so that they can extract any concessions from the Grits.
Chantal?
But there is a risk to that. You can either think that they have made Erin O'Toole less scary by saying that, or else that they have made a lot of swing NDP Liberal voters realize that there is a possibility that the Conservatives will win the election. And a lot of voters on the left side of the spectrum have been operating under the assumption that their choice on September 20th was a minority or a majority Liberal government. Now they are being told in rather stark terms that their choice may be between a Conservative and a Liberal government. I can't tell you where the vote goes from there, but it is a risky move.
Elamine, your thoughts on that, and what you all seemed to agree on last week was that the Liberals were off to a slow start.
I mean, certainly it indicates on part of Jagmeet Singh that he wants to play ball this election. He's trying to increase his seat count. He's not trying to look like the guy who will just willing to prop up the Liberals at any cost. And you know what? That's a strong signal to send. But at the same time, like Chantal said, it does kind of have the inverse problem, which is that the Liberals can now go on the attack. I don't know when. I'm guessing that the Liberals will put this on the shelf, come back to it after Labor Day, and say, listen, the NDP are willing to work with the Conservatives. Now we are your only real choice. And there's a lot of hand-wringing among progressives in terms of saying, no, don't frame the choice like this. But in the end, they end up going back to the Liberal camp. So it might be something that is kind of dangerous for the NDP.
And is there no world in which the NDP could extract things from a Conservative minority government, Andrew? Is that just not a thing?
Well, of course they could. Of course they could. Yeah. If this was the price of the Tories staying in power, they'd pay it. So no, I think the Tories and the NDP are objective allies. The Tories need the NDP to do well to cut votes away from the Liberals. Yep. And the NDP, I think, as job one, needs to prevent the Liberals from doing the play they always do every election, which is demonizing the Tories and telling New Democrat waverers, you have to vote Liberal to stop the Tories, because the floods will rise and winged monkeys will fly over the earth if the Tories get in. So I think this actually fits with that strategy of taking the temperature down. And the closer this race becomes, the more the Liberals are going to be hitting that point. I mean, you can see that coming. Sure. So why not, if you're the NDP leader, try to say, look, actually, I think I can work with this guy. Don't worry, the New Democrats are here. We'll keep them in check. Vote New Democrat to keep them in check. I think that's a perfectly tenable strategy.
I see Chantal has things to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, keep them in check, except if you're an NDP voter that worries about more ambitious climate change targets, you're not going to get those. You're going to get the opposite from the Conservatives. If you believe, as the NDP has worked on for years, about that $10 a day childcare is more important than tax credits, that's also in the balance. And I suspect many in the Indigenous leadership do not believe that the NDP can have the Conservatives on the same track as the Liberals on the issue.
Those are all great reasons to vote progressive for one of the progressive parties. The problem he's got is he has to get people who care about those issues not to just run into the Liberal camp.
Yeah.
I wasn't talking about him. I was talking about the people who are wavering between a vote for the NDP because they feel like doing that and a vote for the Liberals because they're not about to have a Conservative government.
Yeah, but then that's the idea that all the people who were voting Liberal are suddenly going to flood, or many of them flood towards the NDP as the viable option. Last word to you, Althea.
Well, I think the strategies have been perfectly encapsulated by Chantal and Andrew. It's not without risk, frankly, but I was not obviously in the original interview where Mr. Singh made these comments to David Aiken from Global News, but my impression from David's story is that David was making the case that Jack Layton had been able to extract concessions from Stephen Harper, and wouldn't he be able to if he negotiated with Aaron O'Toole? And I think in that context, Mr. Singh said, well, I'm not ruling out working with the Conservatives. I think that was more an organic way than really a kind of master strategy plan with consequences, as has been outlined tonight here.
Last thought to you, Elamine. I have 10 seconds.
I mean, I do have to say that all credit here goes to Aaron O'Toole for making himself a different enough leader of the Conservatives that this is even on the table. I mean, like this was just not on the table 2 years ago. So I have to imagine that they're feeling pretty good about that one.
Okay, Toby the dog wants us to finish, so that's what we will do. Thank you, Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thanks.